Welcome to My Body, My Bump, My Baby, where we help women be empowered, intentional mothers. This podcast is best enjoyed sipping tea or taking a stroll in nature. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be substituted for professional psychological or medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, midwife, or other qualified health provider with any questions about your personal situation, health, or medical condition.
Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about what is a doula. So in the birth world, there are various types of different birth workers. You'll oftentimes hear of obstetricians or OBs, midwives. There's different types of midwives as well. And then a term that is thrown around a lot of times is the term of a doula. But what we have found is it's often something that people are not very familiar with, but it's probably one of the top, like a doula is probably one of the top things that you can add to your birth team to really impact and empower your birth and your choices that you make. So, of course, this is Hannah speaking again today, and then we are here with B as well.
Hello.
B is actually a doula, so I'm going to turn it over to her and be asking her a few questions about her experience as a doula today. And then I also used a doula or had a doula at my birth, so we can speak to that as well. So B, just starting off with the very basics, what is a doula and how does it vary, or how do they vary from other birth workers?
So I think this is such an important topic. And like you said, there's so much confusion about what a doula is. So just the basics, what is a doula? A doula is a person who supports a family. Their real role is supporting the family to achieve a labor goal. Doesn't have to be unmedicated. We'll get into that. There's a lot of people that think it has to be unmedicated, but it doesn't. So to achieve a labor goal, and they do this in a non-medical way. And so I think there's oftentimes a lot of confusion with doula versus midwife, because I think there is the idea that doula equals unmedicated birth. And so oftentimes when someone talks to a doula, they may be thinking that they are more going to provide health care like a midwife would. A midwife is going to actually be a clinical practitioner, licensed in their state. A doula does not do any clinical work. And the way I like to think about it is, you've heard me say this before if you've listened to the podcast, but we are not just a bag of flesh and bones. We have thoughts and emotions that go along with our physical body. And so the midwife or the OB-GYN, they care for the health, safety, and well-being of mama's body and baby's body. And that's it. That's pretty much where their scope of practice ends. They don't tend to spend too much time caring for or focusing on emotional body and mental body or spiritual body. And the doula then comes in and she takes care of the rest of that holistic body. So she only takes care of emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body.
That's really cool. So when you when you choose to have a birth, and say you do something that is unmedicated or like a home birth or a birth center birth, which practitioner will you have as your like clinician?
So hospital birth is typically going to be the OBGYN. OBGYNs are really great medical providers for high-risk scenarios. And of course, they are also the safety net. They're the ones where, we always say 98% of birth and labor is within the realm of normal and, scientifically uneventful. But they are the ones that catch that last, couple of percentage when things kind of go wonky and we need help. So they're fantastic.
They're trained surgeons as well.
They are 100% trained surgeons, yeah. And so they always operate in the hospital setting. And then the midwives, they can kind of toggle between settings, and it depends state by state. So you would have to check with your state's regulations. Hannah and I are in Colorado. And so in the state of Colorado, midwives, there's 2 different types of midwives that practice in Colorado. Certified nurse midwives and then certified professional midwives. And they can practice in different settings. So certified nurse midwife, also called CNM, they can actually practice in a hospital setting, in a birth center, standalone, or within the hospital. And they can do home births as well. A lot of people don't know that they can do home births, which is fantastic. And then the certified professional midwife in the state of Colorado cannot practice in a birth center or in a hospital, but can practice at home and provide home births.
Okay. So that's a really great description of the various areas that you have. So how does a how does a doula work differently in different environments? So a hospital environment where you might not be having an unmedicated birth, or even if you're having a cesarean section, versus a birth center, which is in the middle, versus a home birth. I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
The one thing that is fantastic about the doula is she gets to see birth in all of its different forms. So birth unfolds differently in different circumstances and in different locations. So birth typically will behave one way in a hospital setting and behave completely differently in a home birth setting. The thing that is unique about a doula is that she actually gets to bounce between all of the various settings. And so she gets to know birth in a very different way than some of the clinicians. So the OBGYN only practices in the hospital. The OBGYN will only see birth unfold the way it might unfold in the hospital. The midwives, there are some midwives that spend no time in the hospital ever. And they only do home births, or they only do standalone birth centers. And so they only know how birth unfolds in those settings, which, believe it or not, looks dramatically different. You would be surprised. The doula comes in with this perspective because she actually can go to all of these different locations, and she has a very more well-rounded perspective and view of what birth can look like and how it might unfold, and how changing the location or the people or the things that are happening around a laboring woman, how those things can affect the way birth unfolds and the way a laboring mama reacts to the setting.
Mm-hmm. So that's really pretty cool, because if I'm hearing you correctly, if you say you wanted to have a home birth, but there were circumstances outside of your control that basically required you to have a hospital birth because you were higher risk and you transferred from a midwife to a OB, a doula would be able to be with you throughout all of that.
Right.
So they would start with you whenever you started working with them in your pregnancy, and they would be with you throughout that entire experience all the way up until birth.
Right. This is another benefit of having the doula is because they can go to all of the various locations. That is your static person, right? So if there is a change for some reason, the doula is your constant. And the wonderful thing about a doula, in most doula practices, the model is that you meet 2 to 3 times prior to the labor. And then she usually joins during active labor and then stays until maybe a couple hours after the baby has been born. And then she'll follow up maybe 7 to 10 days after the baby is born just for a postpartum visit and a little bit of check-in and a little bit of closure. But in those 2 to 3 visits prior to the labor, you are getting to know each other and you're getting to form a team. And then this team ideally is on the same page. And so the doula, no matter what setting the mama has chosen for the birth, will typically join the couple, the family, at their home. And so you actually end up having this wonderful person that you have built a relationship with and is incredibly knowledgeable about labor, pregnancy, birth, even though they only focus on the non-physical parts of the holistic model, they're well-versed, very experienced, and very knowledgeable in the physical elements as well. And so you kind of have this wonderful person that you've made a relationship with who is a little bit of a walking encyclopedia of labor and birth at your home with you before it's time for you to move to any new location that you might be moving to, or before it's time for the midwife to arrive at your house, which is fantastic because that doula is able to put the laboring woman at ease, the partner at ease, whoever's on the birth team, and just bring that level of calm that a person that you know and trust and respect can bring to an intense situation.
And you mentioned this a couple of times, the partner, the family unit that's there as well. Can we talk a little bit about how the doula supports the partner throughout the process?
Yes, this is so important. Now, I do have to, put a cautionary statement. Myself as a doula, I practice in this way, and I have worked for years with a group of doulas who also practice in this way. But I will say that maybe they're not all doulas practice in this way. So, just
do your research, talk to the doulas when you're interviewing them and see what works for you.
Yeah, do your due diligence. So the way that we like to practice is to ensure that the entire like the partner or any family members that the laboring woman has chosen to be by her side during labor, that they all understand the plan, that they all are on board, and that they all know how to help and support her. And so one of the things that our group has done, which we really love, is we ensure that the entire team goes through a couple of classes that gives them all the same tool set and level of knowledge.
So the entire team, the entire birth team with the mother.
The mom's birth team that does not include her medical practitioners.
Okay.
Thank you.
To clarify that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if she had like some people like to have their mothers there
as a part of it, yeah.
As a part of it. Or obviously partner would be there. Sometimes, sisters are invited, just whoever the other people might be that are invited. We try to ensure that they all have the same level of knowledge. They all understand mama's goal. So what is her goal in this labor? And they all have a good set of tools that they all understand and know that they can use. So my philosophy is a doula should never be a wedge or get in the way of a partner, very importantly, a partner or any support person that a mother has invited to her space. Rather, the doula should be helping that partner or that support person help the mama And here's why. This is the big deal. The doula, and this is the same as true for the nurses and midwives and the doctor, we're there for just a blip of time on the radar. Like, it's a small amount of time. We come, we do this support work, and then we're out of your life. And you move on and you do life with your family and your partner. So the most important people in this scenario, if they have the skills and the tools to help you, are them. Because whatever bond you guys have created, whatever you go through in this journey together, you come out the other side, and that is now part of your relationship. And so it is of the utmost important that partner feels successful, like they have been able to participate in bringing this baby forward just as much as the woman who is laboring. It's not just, and we hear this so often, partners come in and they're like, well, she's doing all the work. Her physical body is. Mm-hmm. But this is a family event. Mm-hmm. Partner has a very powerful, strong role if they choose to step into it. Mm-hmm. And the way that a partner shows up actually helps to form the new relationship after baby arrives.
Mm-hmm. And think about that too, not even in the birth setting, but in your day-to-day life setting, like how your partner is showing up is impactful to what you're feeling in your body, or how you're acting is impactful to your partner.
100%.
And so there's nothing different about it in birth. It's just that both the couple unit, or whoever it is that is your support team, they need to have additional support. And that's where a doula comes in. Because birth isn't easy. It is so worth it. But it is an amazing experience that is going to be tough, challenging, joyous, and a doula can support you in that space.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the way I see it is, it is the responsibility of the laboring woman and her partner to get educated, to have tools and techniques for the journey of labor. But that can be a lot. Mm-hmm. It's just a ton of information to learn in a very short amount of time. And so they have that skill set, but they are not well versed in it. They're not very practiced. And that's why you have your doula. Mm-hmm. The doula brings to the team the experience of what does labor look like? What does labor sound like? What can we expect to happen next? She can see and recognize those things, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Where the partner, maybe they took the classes, but, it's one thing to read something and they're like, she's 5 centimeters and it's active labor. I mean, what do you do with that?
It doesn't unfold like a textbook either. No.
Right.
Like my experience, they tell you, 5 minutes and 5 and 1 contraction, like every 5 minutes, a 1 minute contraction. Mm-hmm. And then when it gets to 2 or 3, so I don't know, something. They tell you certain things, where I'm going with this. But my labor never unfolded like that. And I actually got, I was so gung-ho on a natural birth from the beginning for personal, reasons too, and some fears that I had in my own, mind and body. And so having a doula was a no-brainer, non-negotiable for me. But it ended up almost being, I think, more impactful for my husband as well. Because when you are in labor land and you are laboring and you are bringing your baby, working to bring your baby onto the earth side, you are not going to be, one, monitoring time, things like that. And then 2, you're just not going to be thinking about anything like that at all.
Yeah.
But where the doula came in for us, and we had a wonderful doula named Lauren, where she came in for us is I hit a point of my labor where we were still at home. I was laboring at home, and I was waiting. We weren't ready to go. The timing was not showing that at all that we were ready to go in to the birth center in any type of way. And I remember laying down and just saying, I want to go to the hospital just to sleep. I'm like, honey, I don't think that's going to happen. Just to be able to sleep. And this was like at noon. And at that point in time, that was when Tony, my husband, knew to call Lauren. Like, that's when you're going to call the doula, like, bring in more reinforcements. And he also had the skills that he had learned through talking through these things in a group setting of reminding me my why and what my goal was, and that wasn't truly what I wanted to do. And then at the same time, leaning on Lauren to ask what to do in the meantime. And then when Lauren came in, she helped, reposition me and, share things that Tony could do to help support me. And she also gave Tony a break, which is so important with the spouse to be able to go take a shower while for example, I went and walked around the block because that's what I wanted to do. And she was, like you mentioned, labor and birth like the back of your hand. You are so familiar, and it unfolds different ways, but you are familiar with the sounds that people are making. You're familiar with the faces that women are making. And it's to the point where a good doula can say, you're ready to move either into the birth pool or to go to the birth center or even the hospital. They can gauge almost where you are based off of your sounds that you're making and your faces that you're making. And I just remember that moment where I was about to get back in the hot shower and Lauren was like, now, do you want to go back in the shower or are you ready to go to the birth center? And my thought, because we had made we had had a conversation ahead of labor about when we would go to the birth center, what around what centimeter mark we were thinking. And I was like, wait, I'm there? This is great. We're going to the birth center. And it was just so easy because my timing, my contractions, the way that they were surges, I like to call them usually, but they were never textbook. But she was able to gauge that I was having 3 major, 1 minor, 3 major, 1 minor. And that was her also understanding of, okay, you've been doing this consistently for X amount of time. We're ready to go in. And so that was really, really cool to experience that without someone measuring where I was, for example, physically touching me to do that, which is something I did not want to happen in my birth. So it's incredible to think of where they are or think of how a doula gains that knowledge. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I also want to touch back on the point of you're there as a support, as a doula, they're there as a support to the parental unit, or whoever else is on your birth team, but they are very nimble. We had a birth photographer, and I'm amazed at how few photos Lauren's in, even though she was a critical part that what I remember, me throwing up into a bag. I think you might see Lauren's hand, I just love it. I mean, it was really, I still remember the smells that she was holding too. It was just really cool.
I love that image that you just created. I feel like a doula who is doing a good job supporting a family should kind of be like that, where all of the photos are the laboring woman and her family, laboring woman and her partner, and cool. Not about the doula, right? We fail when we make it about us. It's not about us. Yeah,
I'm kind of tearing up here because it's you're almost like an angel.
Just floating
in the
around
background.
In the background.
Yeah, exactly. It's so cool. And they just know where, a doula that has experience or that is learning to gain that experience can begin to shift your body into ways just little movements of, okay, lean back for these 2 contractions, or let's go on all fours and just shift the baby into the right position that you need, and your body into the right position that you need, but never telling you what to do, making it an option, and explaining the why, which I really, really love. But in labor words.
Right. Simple, short, quick.
Yes. If you have a doula that's going to sit there and go cha-cha-cha, the whole time that you're in labor, you're unless you want that, but your mind can't handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
With the partner and the doula, I will say, the doula brings her experience of birth that she's gathered, through training and attending births, but she's never going to have the same amount of understanding, knowledge, and experience than the partner does of you. Mm-hmm. And see, this is why they each have a very important role, and each role is equal, and they kind of like help each other. Mm-hmm. So me as the doula, I just don't know you well enough, and it would be impossible to know you well enough in 2 little prenatal visits to know, like, where is your edge? Like how far can you go? Or to kind of read some body language maybe I've never seen before. So for me, I'm like, I'm not really sure what this body language means.
Especially in a vulnerable moment.
Right. Yeah. Well, most people, like, besides your partner and maybe your mom and dad, mm-hmm. we don't get to have deep relationships where people know vulnerability in you, mm-hmm. Most of the time. Those are really rare relationships, mm-hmm. right? So expect somebody to have all of the wisdom, experience, and knowledge of birth, but also have all of the wisdom, experience, and knowledge of you and your vulnerable state is just pretty rare for that to be contained in one person. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I love that the partner is there, and the partner can help the doula also read the laboring mama. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to say, this is what I want, but then when we get there, sometimes things change. Yeah. Or sometimes it's like, holy cow, this is not quite what I expected. Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes we have to make decisions that are a little bit different than we had anticipated. And we do that with the person who has the knowledge of birth, the person who has all the medical knowledge, and then the person who knows the mama. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great if you have your partner there with you. If your partner isn't there, though, finding someone where you feel the comfort of being vulnerable to be your support person in addition to a doula can be so incredibly helpful, because they, like your mother or even your father, oftentimes, like I know of births where people have had their fathers there or their sisters or mm-hmm. siblings. Someone that you just have the ability to release trust into in that regard is really helpful.
Absolutely. We're here in Colorado Springs, and we live in a military town, and yes. There are a lot of times where a family is transplanted to this area, and then the partner is deployed. And then there's a woman who has the potential of going into labor and birthing a baby all on her own, just with strangers. And I say strangers because I don't feel like most OB practices, just because of the client load that they're required to handle, have the time to really create a personal relationship. They're just kind of...
It's like, insurance and things come into play where it limits the amount of time that they can spend with you.
Right. So they really do only have time to focus on the physical. And so they don't know you very well as a person. They know the physical you. Mm-hmm. The nurse staff at the hospitals are the floor staff. So it's a labor and delivery, and those nurses work shifts on labor and delivery, but you don't get to meet them before the birth. You don't get to build a relationship with them before the birth. So those are also typically strangers. And so, if for whatever the circumstances are, you are looking at birthing your baby on your own, I would say at a minimum, have a doula, mm-hmm. because that person you can build a relationship with.
Absolutely. And something else that has popped into my mind lately about the support team too is, especially with the military families, oftentimes you are away from family as well, or this is not just military, but maybe you don't have a good relationship with families, or you've just been transplanted, etc. There are plenty of doulas in training too that can work with you on a more in-depth basis in the beginning, and then you have your doula in addition to them. So the doula in training is getting their experience. They are able to go deeper with, even deeper as a support person with you, and then you also have your doula. So you're getting 2 for 1 almost in this setting.
Right. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we say about birth is The more help we have, the better, just as long as those hands are helpful.
Yes.
The more help we have, the better.
And you want to be on the same page as your birth team that's there too. I know the birth center, they brought up, like, make sure, like, whoever is coming into your, like, sacred space with you is on the same page about what you want. Because if someone says, I think she needs to go to the hospital, that means that regardless of who that is, that means we're going to the hospital, which is so interesting.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
We definitely have to dive deeper into that. So what the heck does that really mean? So
Great, because maybe I don't know.
Not all humans are the same, right? We all have our stories that we come with, and there are some doulas who come with a story, and that story has put them on a mission, which means that for whatever reason, their belief system says that maybe there are certain kinds of labor experiences that are good or okay or right. And there are some labor experiences that are done wrong, negative,
black and white.
Bad, right. Which I don't prefer, because we're all different and we all have our stories, and we have to approach birth from the place that we're at that moment.
And every birth is different. Like, one woman's birth for her first child might not be the same for her third or fourth or second.
Right. So when we get into this place where we're like, there's only one right way to birth, and this doesn't have to be a doula. This can be anybody. It can be a family member. It can be the pregnant woman. When we get to this place where we're like, there's only one right way, we're doing the round hole and the square peg. Yeah. We're saying the round hole is the only way. But if birth provides you with the triangle or a square peg, you're just going to fight it. And so what they're saying, and this is not just for doulas, this is for anybody that you invite into your birth space. And that means that those people will be there as the baby sliding out, right? Anybody that you invite into the birth space has to be open-minded to allow labor to flow. And that includes a laboring mama. We can't get too rigid, because birth rarely does what we say. It rarely follows our rules. So part of the training of pregnancy and labor is training the new mother to be flexible and to flow. Because
to let go.
Yes, to let go of control.
Yes.
Because once the baby comes...
Have fun controlling.
Right. They have a mind of their own. Yeah. They're doing their own
They're a little
thing.
human. Like,
yes.
They are what you were once, and if you're controlling now, you can just think about how that happened.
Right.
Yeah.
They are a separate human being. They have their own thoughts. Even though they're in a tiny little package, they have their own mission, and it's not necessarily going to be the same as yours. So everybody has to allow it to flow. We have to be very careful about assigning labels, like this is the bad way and this is the good way. Yep. That's not fair. And it's just not true, you know? And so where this comes to play oftentimes is there might be a duel or a fight between what most people will call natural birth, which I don't like that terminology, natural birth. What they mean is unmedicated vaginal birth versus medicated birth. A birth that occurs with an epidural is no less natural than an unmedicated birth. It's still natural. Yeah.
All births.
There's just some medications helping it along. So there's often this little war between medicated and unmedicated birth. This is where this usually comes into play. And so when, people are saying, be careful about who you invite into your space, make sure that, one, they're on the same page, but two, that they can allow labor and birth to flow as it needs to flow. Because when we don't do that, when we try to control it and force it to go into this little circle that it doesn't fit into, it turns really ugly. Ultimately, birth always wins in the end. Yeah. We always will lose that battle.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen the way birth says it has to happen, and that's it. And that's one of the tricky things for women who are pregnant when they kind of like, I'm going to do it this one way, and it starts to unfold a different way. Sometimes there's this like fighting and like, but I don't want to transfer, like the scenario that you mentioned a minute ago. I don't want to transfer. I wanted it this way. I didn't want to be there. I don't want those interventions. But sometimes birth says you need it.
Yes. And there's a difference, and there's having your team there to be able to say whether you need it or not, and like know you so deeply. Mm-hmm. And that's also where a clinical piece comes into it as well, which is why there's one clinical provider usually, at least.
Right. They're responsible for keeping you and your baby safe.
Yes, exactly. And they can provide the informed knowledge of like what happens if this or that, which I love. I want to talk a little bit about training. Mm-hmm. So how does a doula come to be? There's a couple of paths.
There are a couple of paths. I mean, it starts, in my opinion, with a calling. There's something, in the back of her mind, or his mind. I've known male doulas as well. Cool. So there's something in the back of the person's mind that is calling them to birth. And I will say, for anybody who is feeling a calling, if birth is calling you, it's calling you. I don't feel like you can really ignore it for very long. It's going to stay, and it's going to continue to call. So starts with the calling. The next step should be education. Sometimes people will volunteer to be a support person as a stepping stone to kind of like feel it out. Like, I'm feeling this calling. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know how it's going to feel in my body, so I'll volunteer to help a friend or a family member. And then after that birth, or somewhere in the process of that woman's pregnancy, they get into a training. There are all kinds of different trainings out there. I think one of the questions comes up often is like, which is the right training, or which is the approved training? And this is really tricky. Doulas currently in the United States, it's not regulated. So your midwife has licensure, your real estate agent has licensure, your massage therapist has licensure. Doulas do not. Mm-hmm. So really it comes down...
Because they're not medically based. Again.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So then it comes down to find the one that speaks to you. Find the one that aligns with your values and what you think is going to work for your life, and then get into a program. Most programs, they might be just a small weekend workshop, and then you do self-study for a year to 2 years. We at Enso, we offer a program I just value contact hours.
With people physically learning. You're not just learning the stages of birth. You are actually learning how to connect empathically with a human being.
Yes, right. So it's not just, college course of just, here's all the book knowledge. Because that's not what we do. We don't do the book knowledge. We need to know the book knowledge, but that's not really the meat and potatoes of what a doula does. The meat and potatoes of what a doula does is interacts with people, connects with people, reads people, understands what they need, and then tries to anticipate and provide those needs. And so we have a program where we offer, it's 6 full days of in-person practice and curriculum with professional doulas, and then another 3 evenings of like hands-on training. Like, you actually get to practice and do these things and think through some scenarios and all of that kind of good stuff. But there are a ton of great trainings out there. So you go through your training. When you're finished, you get a certificate. And then you're ready to go. Go out there and help.
How do you shadow a birth then? Or like how do you be a doula at a birth after that? Like, have you even had experience to be able to do that in every training?
Yeah, so some people have, and some people have not. What I will say regarding experience is giving birth does not make you a doula.
Okay.
They are not the same experience or skill level at all. So even if you've given birth before multiple times, you do want to find a way to attend some births. So there are doulas who provide mentorship programs. I really, really love mentorship programs. I think that they are super helpful. And that is a scenario that you kind of talked to a little bit earlier, where there's an experienced doula and then there's her shadow. And the shadow gets to be in the laboring space and participate and learn and see, but not be on the hook to know all of the things.
And if you think that a regular doula is, very nimble and out of the picture, a shadowing doula is even more out.
Yes.
We had one at my birth too. It was really cool.
Did you notice her?
Very little, but what I do remember was extremely helpful.
Nice.
What I do remember, which was great. I was like, 2 for 1.
Yes.
So yeah, I was like 2 people to hang off of.
And doulas, experienced doulas, for me, I always loved having a shadow because they're helpful.
Yeah.
And we usually train them beforehand how to be quiet and, in the shadows a little bit so that they're not in the forefront and getting in the way. And so then they end up being just a quiet little shadow helper, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. So becoming a doula is pretty easy. You do need to have some business knowledge, some entrepreneurial drive.
If you want to get clients.
If you want to get clients, yes,
an experience.
Right.
I love that mentorship piece of advice. If you are a doula and you're looking to get experience, I feel like that's a phenomenal way. Do you know how many births you have underway?
Me?
Off the top of your head that you've worked with?
I used to...
Or kind of remembering of numbers.
I used to write down each one in a little book. And when I got to 300, I just stopped.
Yeah. And that's
counting.
A lot for, just to paint this picture, the picture for the audience here. If you had 300 births in a year, you would be working 365 days nonstop, day and night.
Right.
So that is years and years and years of experience. How many years have you been doing this?
9.
9 years, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not easy work. As a doula, you are with the laboring mama from active labor until a few hours after usually. So imagine 12 to 24 hours for a birth. And that for carrying on with years and years of experience, over 3 to 4 without having that burnout occur is just incredible. And I know that it has happened, you've slowed down in the work that you do and you've chosen to but teach others too and share your knowledge. But when you're finding a doula and you're speaking with them, that's one of the questions you can also ask is how many birth experiences have you had? And that doesn't stop you from hiring someone who says I've had 1.
Right.
That just means you might be getting more knowledge one way or the other.
Right.
Or different pieces of knowledge.
Right. And, just to add a little bit more perspective on that as well, obviously the OBGYN and the midwife, they're going to have a ton of births under their belt as well. But they will have per birth less hours. So this is something that a lot of people don't think about. So the OBGYNs...
I'm going to do math on this while you're talking.
Okay. So the OBGYN, on average, spends between 15 to 30 minutes in the room before the baby comes out. Mm-hmm. And then maybe 15 to 20 minutes after the baby comes out. So it's really a small amount of time. Midwives... Typically, if you're at a birth center, they want you to arrive somewhere around 8 centimeters, and they don't spend all that time in there. Nope.
They also want to be giving you the space.
They want to give you space, and they also usually have multiple mamas that they're supporting at one time, so they can't be in that space at the whole time. And so they might come in for little 15-minute blocks on each hour.
Checking heart rate, doing things like that, just verifying everything's going well.
So, you know, ideally, a woman who comes and gives birth at a birth center should only be spending about 4 hours of time, maybe 5 hours of time before baby is born there. And so the midwife would be about 15 minutes each hour. So what does that end up being? 2.5 hours,
yeah.
2 hours or so. And then the home birth midwife will typically arrive at your home when you're about 8 centimeters, and they do stay there the whole time. They don't leave, but they don't always stay in your space. So like if you're in your bedroom, they'll come in, they'll check on you, they'll let you and your partner do your thing, and then they pop out and they'll go into the living room. And
clean your kitchen.
Right.
Seriously,
exactly.
though.
Yeah, just spend time out of your space.
Yep.
And so there's this very similar to the birth center midwife. The doula, on the other hand, is by your side from the moment that she arrives until 2 hours after the baby is born. So that could be anywhere from, 2 hours if it was really, things were unfolding really quickly, to my first births. My first births, I think, were like crazy number of hours, like 30,
twins?
40 hours. That was 14 hours.
Okay.
But my first non-twins were they're still really high.
Yeah.
Just really high. So even though you have a doula who says, I was like when I was
Let's
new.
talk about how many hours they have.
Right. I've only attended 2 births. Well, how many hours of birth have you experienced? Yeah. Well, if you would have asked me that, I would have had something on the line of 40 hours after I've done 2 births. Well, now that's significantly different, right?
Yep. 40 hours of birth, and then for an OB, spending 1 hour, I'm going to up-level that to about an hour probably with the in and out time. For the same number of births, that's 2 hours.
Right. Which means that they kind of get to know birth a little differently too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
the emotional and mental and spiritual side of it. Makes sense. Okay, so for women who are on the fence about choosing a doula, what is the one thing that you would give them as a do it because of this as a doula, and then I'll give experience as a mother?
I think the one most important thing that a doula brings is an energy of calm. I have a lot of mamas who come through, and so the yoga classes or the childbirth classes, and I will ask them, what kind of labor experience are you planning for or hoping for? And 9 times out of 10, they will say, calm, peaceful experience. Mm-hmm. If you hire the doula, she'll bring that calm and the peace.
Yep.
Yeah.
And bring it back when it's needed or sliding out.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I love that. As a mother and a mother that birthed with a doula at my birth, I should say our birth, because of what I'm about to say, I think that one of the most beneficial pieces of having Lauren there was the impact it had with my spouse too, and his ability to feel confident in the decisions that we were making as a pair, and feel confident in that knowledge that he learned beforehand, and just, I think he was really hungry and really tired too, but just being able to have I don't want to call it a cheerleader, but a supporter keeping him going during that period of time, because we have, as a woman, we have all of the hormonal, pieces that are keeping us going. They don't have that, and they need a little bit more of that support and that oomph.
And what I will say is, most partners, they want to participate.
Yes.
They want
They don't
to
always
be
know
there.
what to do, but they want to be supported, to not be told necessarily, but just be directed or like redirected and things.
And they love you and they want to do a good job.
Yeah.
And they don't want to fail you, right? And so they want to fill all of your needs. When you invited them in to be your birth partner, they're like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal, and it's overwhelming and it's scary. But when they can show up in a very real way and feel positive about it and know that they actually got to participate in the birth of their baby, it's beautiful. It's amazing.
It is. It's a really great experience. So moral of the story, if you are on the lines of deciding to hire a doula, maybe do a little bit more research, maybe re-listen to this podcast. There are some great resources out there. Enzo Prenatal is located in Colorado Springs, but there is a website that will link to this podcast. And also operating in the same space is the Doula Circle, where there are doulas that work out of this space, not really, but they do, but they come to your home, obviously. And there's some great resources that you can read online from like the Doula Circle, and just read their bios and learn and chat with people. And I'm not saying the Doula Circle is all that there is, but there are amazing resources, and just have conversations with people.
Yes. I think in the future we should do a podcast on how to hire a doula.
Oh, yeah.
So like take it to the next level.
Yeah, of like like how do you have an interview? Like what questions do you ask? I get asked that actually very often in my coaching sessions with women, and I give my personal experience from it and what questions to ask. But I would love to pull that resource together.
Yeah, so we'll do one more. We'll take it up a level. So what is a doula, and then the next one is like, well, how do you hire one?
Yeah, and that'll be a shorter one, but it'll be a quick.
But it'll still be
maybe it could be just a fake, I don't know, or an interview back and forth.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to having you again, Mama, and let us know if there's anything that you'd like to hear from us.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye.